All right, the lights are on and it's rolling, so I'll get started. Um, all right, so thanks so much for joining me. This is something I've had on my to-do list selfishly for a long time, and really excited to have it really come together in front of you. So, start off with a little baseball. Hank Aaron, baseball's home run champion of a previous generation. Like all major leaguers, he started out in the minor leagues, and in one of his first minor league games, the following happened. I got up to bat. He got a hit, gets on first base. He's feeling good about himself. He says, you know what? I'm going to steal. I'm going to take off for second base. The pitcher throws his pitch. He takes off running. He's running. Catcher catches it, throws it out towards second base. Hank Aaron slides just before the ball gets there. Umpire yells, safe. He stands up. He congratulates himself. Second baseman looks at him and says, nice one, kid. Step off the base for a second so I can straighten it out. Sure. Steps off the base, hits him with the glove, trots back to the dugout. A few innings later, he's up again. Gets another hit. He's on first base again. Says, well, I'm feeling good. I'm taking off. I'm going to steal. Starts off running. Pitcher pitches. The ball's coming out towards second again. He's looking good. He slides. Big cloud of dust. Umpire yells, safe. Stands up again. Second baseman says, man, you're having quite a day. I got to smooth out that dirt. Just move over for a second. Hank Aaron says, sure. Steps off the base again. Hits him with the glove. Trots back to the dugout. That happened one more time in that game, so 3 times. So when you're a rookie, when you're new at something, you may do something a little silly, and that's okay. That may happen today, so you're welcome to laugh. So it's nice to be in front of so many friendly faces. All right, so the story that I'm going to share about work. So my family, Rudalavage family, from upstate, Scranton area. 1964, my dad leaves his family's farm to start his career. He left because there wasn't opportunity to work there. He settled in Philadelphia. By the time he was 40, he had a successful career as an accountant and a wonderful young family. But there was something unsettled in my dad's work life. He worked in an office all day, but what he loved to do was to be outdoors and growing things. I remember he'd come home from work dressed in a suit and tie, and he'd just start right into gardening. Wouldn't even change. Suit, tie, dress shoes, cruising around the yards, pulling weeds till he had a clump of weeds the size of a beach ball in his hands. He loved to grow things. That's what he did in all his free time. And when he had even more free time, he'd take our family, my mom, my older brother and I, back to the farm where he grew up so we could experience being there, outdoors, growing things. They had a Christmas tree farm, apple orchard. So my dad, being an accountant, he was a very pragmatic person. And being that way, he was certain of something, and it was this. There was no money in farming. But yet, what he loved to do was to be outdoors, growing things. So it was unsettled in his life was this decision, the farm versus the office. Unfortunately for my dad, he never got a chance to resolve that argument. When he was 42, he was diagnosed with cancer. And by 44, he had died. Now me, I'm 44. I just turned 44. And when I turned 40, I also had an unsettled feeling in my work life. Now, for me, it wasn't between the farm and the office. I don't particularly enjoy growing things. But what it was, well, I couldn't even, whoever's laughing must have driven past my house recently. It's very clear I'm not good at growing things. Um, so, yeah, I couldn't even define those two sides of the argument. So when you can't decide what the decision is, it might mean you're indecisive. And what it was a lack of feeling of meaning and purpose in the work that I was doing every day. And it wasn't a new feeling. Now, in my 20s, to combat that feeling, what I did was I switched jobs a lot. Every year, 18 months or so, I would switch jobs and I would start over. And the challenge with that is, well, a few things. One, you don't know what you're doing. And then the other part, though, is it's tough to fit in, right? Because it's just new surroundings, new people, new work, all those types of things. Now, as I got a little closer to 40, I got more settled in my career, but I still had that feeling, that lack of meaning in what I was doing. And I noticed it most in stressful moments, right? I would certainly doubt myself, my abilities, but even beyond that, the purpose in what I was doing. And yeah, the stressful situations, those were the toughest. And what I want to share with you today, and I'm glad that you're here, is how I kind of grew out of that feeling a little bit. And I want to share it because it might provide a new perspective for you in maybe the work that you do in some of those surroundings. So that's kind of the first step. And then the bigger one might be to think about how we do our work on a daily basis that can take care of everyone in our community. So that's the purpose of the story. So, and I have speaker notes for everybody. So at the end, just that'll be there so you can just listen and keep track of everything. So there I was 40. I was frustrated. I was frustrated because I wish that my dad had given me some words, right, to guide me through this kind of challenge. But I didn't have them, and I was frustrated. Has anyone ever blamed a parent for anything in their lives? Right? Like, oh, we got it, right? Yeah, right. Kids do it all the time. Um, Adults do it too, right? Adults do it too. I've done both. Certainly, I've done both. So I was frustrated because I couldn't figure it out for myself. But now I had my own kids, my own sons, Timmy and Connor, and I wanted to figure it out for them too. That have the words for them to pass on to them, and I didn't have it. And there were signs that I was falling short with those words. I remember picking up my son Connor when he was 4, preschool, and we're walking in the car together, and he says, "Dad, do you know what destiny means?" I thought, "Whoa, big word for a 4-year-old, right?" So I look at him, I said, "Connor, I think I know what destiny means. Do you know what destiny means?" And he looks at me and he says, "Your butt. It means your butt, Dad." It's one of the finest preschools in Montgomery County there. So anyway, so I was falling short with those words and I was frustrated. What I didn't know at the time, though, 4 years ago, was I was about to get some help from an unlikely source. See, my dad, he left the farm in 64, but in 1965, a man in Kentucky was making the opposite choice. He was choosing to return home to the farm where he grew up. This man, an author named Wendell Berry, he was a successful author, still is today, but he had lived in New York City, he lived in California, was an author. He made a choice, a specific choice to return home to be a farmer, to farm land right next to where his family had for 6 generations. So he made that choice, and he would farm all day, but he would continue writing. And what he wrote about, well, the style he wrote, poems, stories, essays, but what he wrote about was, yeah, he wanted to entertain us, but also teach us the importance of farm life, of agricultural life, that way of life. And he also, in the 60s and 70s, over a long time, started to gather his thoughts over something which was really troubling to him, and it was this: in our country, we were losing millions and millions of farmers in our country, that they were leaving the land. In 1910, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, almost 1/2 of all people in the United States either lived or worked on a farm. Fast forward to 2010, it's 1 out of 100. So we were losing these millions of farmers over time. And what was concerning to him was that we were focusing just on growing food, and we were ignoring who we were as people. And so he gathered up kind of his notes, his research over this time, and he published a book in 1977 called The Unsettling of America, Culture and Agriculture. And in this book, he made his argument. He laid out very carefully all the benefits that he saw we were overlooking in farm life, in agricultural life. So that book, 1977, coincidentally, is the year that I was born. Now, for the first 40 years of my life, I had never heard of that book. I never heard of Mr. Berry until one night I had a little bit of destiny. I was sitting on my butt, so maybe my son Connor had a little bit of foreshadowing there. I couldn't sleep one night. It's strange for me. Normally, whatever's going on in my life, I could sleep. So I walked downstairs. I turned on public television. I don't normally watch public television. At that time, I didn't have cable, so I was relying on the rabbit ears. But for some reason that night, the signal, it was coming in strong. And I turned on the TV, and there's a photo of a farm, a video of a farm, people working there. Mr. Berry talking about this importance of agricultural life, and something clicked. I was like, farming. I never thought about that. Like I had never thought that there might be some lessons there that could help me. See, because the challenge that I had in work life, it was a long time, 20 to 40. I was trying to figure it out. I was working hard, but I was also reading too. I was reading a lot, business books, entrepreneurship books, leadership, autobiographies, self-help books. I'm reading all these books, and never once thought there might be something in farming that might help me out. So I scribbled down the name of this book, Done Selling America. I got it from the library. I read it, I reread it, and it's brought me on the start of the path to be in front of you um, today. Um, like I said, 1910, it was one half of all people lived or worked on a farm. And we had that huge change. So let's do a little survey here. How many of you live in the same town where you grew up? Show of hands if we don't mind. Okay. I like now, Chuck. You only put up a finger now. Now, Chris grew up in the same town and put his hand way up. So I don't know. We might have to talk about that. We might have to talk about that later in the hometown pride evaluation. um, okay. So how many of you do the same work as a parent? The same job, same profession. Okay. All right. We've got a few. All right. Okay. And let's go back two generations. Does anybody in the room live in the same town and do the same work as a grandparent? Okay, so things are changing, right? In our work where we live, what's staying the same? What's staying the same? Um, all right, so I got this book from the library. Big deal, right? Big deal. Well, I'm starting to grow a little bit and be able to define that decision. If you remember, I said I couldn't even pick out those two sides of how to make that decision in my work. So I'm getting a little closer. So what was different though about Mr. Berry? Because here's this kind of farmer author, never heard of, comes into my life. It's totally different. What was different about him? Well, a few things. One, he told stories and gave perspective in a setting, which was that farm setting that I could identify with. Um, the words that he used were familiar, like the word like manure. That was something that my dad, he always fertilized our garden with cow manure. So where we grew up in Ambler, about a 20-minute drive away, there was a dairy farm called Freddie Hill Farms. And we would go out there. We thought we were getting ice cream. We weren't. We were getting cow poop. All right. But my dad was excited. I mean, it was like, uh, right. So words like that, farm, tractor, brush, like as Mr. Berry started to give these lessons and things, it made sense to me because of that background. I remember my grandmother on the farm later years in life. She was always concerned that you got to get the fields cut. Don't want brush to grow up. Like those were normal things. One thing my dad did for my brother and I when we were little, even though we grew up in Ambler in the suburbs, we got little summer jobs at the farm, right? So there was a farm nearby, and we'd do things. Probably the best job I had was I was pretty young, probably 11. I got to drive a tractor. I was like, oh, this is great. I don't know, I should drive a tractor for $3 an hour, like whatever. Like it was cool. Uh-oh. We never actually saw the books of that. We just got money at the. We're just happy to get something. But yeah, so we worked on the farm. So as I'm getting these lessons, it's starting to resonate with that. Yeah, drove the tractor, picked corn, picked different things, related to corn. We had a big wagon piled. Now the farmer that we worked for, he didn't use pesticides. Um, so we had these little like little worms on the corn. I don't know if everyone's got those. I see a few nods or whatever. So you got to flick those off anytime. So those are all part of the deal. And related to corn too, my dad, he claimed he was a corn shucking champion, although we never saw a trophy. So we don't know, but I'm not sure who would make that up, right? Anyway, so he's given us surroundings. So that really identified with. And if I contrast it someone like Steve Jobs, who I studied, obviously amazing leader, talented person, but he grew up in California, different climate, different setting, surroundings, the neighborhood that he grew up in. Everyone worked in electronics and engineering. So it was just different. And certainly the information that he gave was really, really important, but at the same time, it just never connected on a deep level. All right, so that was the second one. The second way was different was Mr. Berry, being the farmer out doing his work, he embraced physical work as being necessary and important and a positive thing. And that was different for me, right? These other books I'm reading are talking about maybe strategy and time management. And like Mr. Berry is like, oh, you just got to get after it, so to speak. And I was like, wow, this is kind of, that's kind of cool. I know Josh is here. He loves chopping firewood. So he's one of those guys that just wants to get out there and do it. And you say, no, that's a normal thing. And it's not that we should just dig a ditch all day and not think about anything, but the idea that our physical work comes first, and then we use our education to supplement that. Just a different approach to it. And then the third way is that he had work decisions of a second generation college graduate. So he had real decisions, meaning he was a little bit different. Born in 1934, Mr. Berry, um, both his parents attended and graduated from college. So there was a level of education that gave him more opportunities in his life, but he had to evaluate them carefully. Like he could have, lived in the city. He could have, when he moved back to Louisville, he could have been a professor in town, but he evaluated everything. So I resonated with that because that was one of the challenges. I had too many choices in that work life. Does anyone ever feel like they have too many choices? Yeah, yeah, it's a lot sometimes. So I was able to resonate that with that he had real choices and evaluated it and came up with this decision. And if I contrast it with my dad, you know, saying it was unsettled, this farm versus the office. Well, for him, it really, think back, I don't think it was a real decision, meaning that they grew up on the farm, they lived very frugally, grew their own food, sold extra on the side of the road. That for him to say after all that sacrifice, no thanks, I'm just going to move back home. I don't think it would have been well received, certainly by my grandfather, as to say the least. So we had those real decisions. And so getting back to Mr. Berry opened me up this idea, what he was concerned about in our agriculture is that we were focusing on just growing food and we were ignoring those traditions in our work, that who we were as people and our culture. And the key takeaway that I have in our decisions about work, we have a key one, which is this: we can choose tradition or we can choose productivity. So now I'm getting a little more in line here. I can kind of define those two sides of my work, right? That I have this choice to make in what I do every day. I can either choose tradition or I can choose productivity. So what does that mean? Because those are kind of two big concepts. Well, the first I'm gonna share four of them here. Mr. Berry talked about in our work we have a choice. On the tradition side, we can choose to be a nurturer, and on the productivity side, we can choose to be a specialist. And the idea is the nurturer is someone who wants to grow their relationship with their work and also with their surroundings related to their work. Whereas the specialist just wants to do one specific task with the goal of doing that in the most productive way. Now, um, I don't know if anyone else, but I hear the word specialist, I immediately think of a surgeon or a doctor, right? And they see Chris and Ryan, they've been the beneficiaries of that, recently in their life. Like that's an amazing thing. Um, my wife Cecily works in the dental industry, and she works with oral surgeons. If someone's teeth have failed them, surgically they can give someone a whole new mouth. Like that's incredible. That's a good thing. But it's more about our daily lives, and that Mr. Berry, we talk about this level of stress in our lives we have sometimes, that we're surrounded by things that we don't understand, simple things, where our food comes from, right? That we don't know it, and deep down, whether we realize it or not, it's making us a little bit more anxious. As I think most of you know in the room, I had a little stint as a chicken farmer for about 3 years at my house, but it it really helped me understand that idea that just being able to handle that one small part of the food process really, I know that I could, if I needed to, I could go back and do it, right? And that's really powerful. And I've noticed it in work too, where the work that I've been doing recently, where I saw the lighting systems. When I first started out, the approach was we're going to rely on specialists for every little part of what we do. And what I noticed is that created a lot of stress in my life. That I was waiting for someone to do this, hoping that someone would do that, and I didn't understand it fully. And now that Mr. Berry has come into my life with that observation, I'm like, no, I want to nurture my relationship with the work so that it just goes easier because of that stress level. All right, second way that that we can make this decision, tradition versus productivity, is we can, on the tradition side, commit to a place, or on the productivity side, we can move off and live anywhere. So those are the two sides of that. So Has anyone recently said to themselves, man, I just don't have enough time in my day to do everything I need to do? Oh, all right. Wow. All right. Um, so, how much of our lives have we spent moving? According to the National Association of Realtors, on average, we move every 6 to 18 years, right? That's just on average. I think of myself personally, being 44 now, I think I moved 6 times over the last 20 years. So we're wasting time with that. But then there's even something more important to that, where we can commit to a place and start to observe our surroundings and measure ourselves on our surroundings. And what I found for me in my marriage, that's one of the strongest points of our marriage, is that my wife Tess and I, um, we live where we live in Ambler. We want to live there for the rest of our lives. So we talk about it with our kids as well, and the decisions that they make, we want to encourage that. And not that we would ever hold them back by any stretch, but we just see the value in committing to a place. Might be one less thing just on your list, right? If you just pick that's where I'm going to stay. So that's certainly part of it. And then the other part related to place is related to our education that again, Mr. Berry pointed out, which I never thought about before. If any of you guys are fans of Parks and Recreation, Nick Offerman, he's a big Wendell Berry, so I'll connect you guys with that later. But committing to that place in our education, what he pointed out was our land grant college system was originally founded to make us better workers in the state where we live. And that was the idea. There's a problem in Pennsylvania. We have a university system that's going to solve that problem. But over time, it's evolved to now where we're just making people productive workers at the university, and they can go off wherever they choose to work. And I just never thought that before, but it's the idea of saying, okay, if we commit to a place, that's the first step, but then we can mold our education system to take care of that place. Um, the third way in this decision is in our work. On the tradition side, we can choose work where we're measured on how well we work, or on the productivity side, we can choose work where we're measured on how much you produce. So a lot of us in the room work in the construction industry. A lot of times the projects are long, maybe 1 or 2 years. And what I've noticed, and I'm certainly responsible for this because I'm part of the process slash problem, whatever we want to. But a lot of times that work can be, it's stressful, and it's finished. And then the output, though, the result of it is often very, very good. But what's not is the steps along the way, those daily steps that if we focus more on working well, we can improve on those. So that's another way that we can do that. Um, and then the fourth one. So if you start to see this little evolution in my life is how I'm making decisions about work differently. But it's nice to have a checklist. Some people in the room know I love checklists. It helps me keep focused, right? So that's a good thing. So I have this little list, but as far as getting into a deeper level, that's where I'm headed now, and sharing a little bit more of a personal story to get us there. If it hasn't been personal enough already, right? Um, so in our work, again, tradition versus productivity, we can choose the opportunity to work as more critical than output, or we can choose to produce output with the minimum amount of labor. And Mr. Berry has some specific words on this when he says, as a people, we must learn again to think of human energy, our energy, not as something to be saved, but as something to be used and to be enjoyed in use. We must understand that our strength is, first of all, strength of body, and that strength cannot thrive except in decent, satisfying, comely work. So that work makes us strong as people. And if we were going to ask other people in our community to be strong, then they need that opportunity to work. I remember being in my grandmother's kitchen on the farm, and as a little boy, and her brother, my Uncle Joe, came over for lunch, and he's sitting next to me. And he looks at me, he says, "You want to see my muscle?" And I was like, all right, never been asked that before by an adult, but he was pretty big and he was right next to me, and it seemed like the answer he wanted was yes. So I said, sure, Uncle Joe, let me see your muscle. So he unbuttons the sleeve, right, and he goes like this and he flexes it, and out of his arm pops this grapefruit size softball, size muscle. And my mom's laughing because he must have done this multiple times. I only remember this. I remember this one time. But right, I remember that. And I got home that night, and what did I do? Of course, I went to the mirror, rolled up my sleeve, and I flexed. And I had nothing. It was flat. You could play pool across that thing. And I was so disappointed. But I had an idea. So I took my two fingers and my flabby little skin and I pushed it up behind my muscle. And I looked in the mirror and I had this big fake muscle. Have you ever tried to make yourself look stronger than you really are? It usually doesn't go well. Um, right, but that was Uncle Joe. That was his strength. That was his talent. That was his talent and his strength. And Mr. Berry connected with me with the idea like that's very normal and natural to feel that way. And as I share a little bit of that personal path, as I was trying to figure out things in my 20s, I went down a little bit of a different path, unique, maybe all the choices that I made in work. And, maybe one of the reasons was I didn't have my dad giving me kind of this direction, but if I'm honest about it, like I was probably know it all back then anyway. So I probably wouldn't have listened to some sound advice back then anyway. But nevertheless, I want to share that story in the ages about 25 to 30, some of the work that I did. Actually, neighborhood's not, right around here, believe it or not. So, uh, all right. So if you drive up into Trenton, New Jersey on Route 1, you go on a bridge into New Jersey. Um, if you look to your left, there's a sign on the bridge. Does anybody know what that says? I see some hands. I know the synergy people know. I'm going to go now. Heather, Heather, what does it say? All right. You want a set follow-up question or not? Any guess on what that, like, you saw that? Any guess on what it might mean or why it's there? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's a testament to the manufacturing power of Trenton, but not just Trenton. I mean, that's for the sign, but also Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. And there's facts that back this up. According to a paper by the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia in 1960, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, 40% of people worked in manufacturing. And so we had a lot of manufacturing jobs in 1960. So if we follow this paper, right, this is how much we're producing goods, 1960, okay? Those three states. If we follow forward to 1995, so move forward in time, we're producing the same amount of goods from 1960 to 1995, okay? Same amount of goods. Over that time, though, we're doing it with 800,000 less workers. So 800,000 less workers in our community over that amount of time. So we made that choice. If you follow the math there, right? We made that choice for productivity at that time. So now I'm going to share kind of what I observed in those years of my life to share that perspective. But then hopefully I can do it in a way that is a positive way, certainly for everyone in the room. So in 2001, I found myself in one of those manufacturing towns in Camden, New Jersey. So I worked for a construction company, and my boss said, "We need you to go down to Camden to the construction site to do some paperwork there." And so, sure, I got my pickup truck and I drove down into Camden. Now, at this point in Camden, I only been to the concert venues, but now this brought me back into some of the neighborhoods, of the city where we're building townhouses. And as I drove in, I was just shocked at what I saw: abandoned factories, abandoned houses, some that were torn down. And I'd always heard on the news, certainly growing up in Philadelphia, that Camden was going through some tough times, but it was a little bit different to be there in person. But the company that I worked for, or I went to the job site that day, they were very successful building houses for people of modest means. And I said, you know what? I'm young, I'm energetic, I'm going to do the same thing. So decided, my brother and I, that we were going to buy a house in a different manufacturing town, West Oak Lane, section of Philadelphia, not too far from here, just a few miles from here. So we bought a house. Plan was fix it up. We're gonna rent it out. So one of the first things we decided to do was to paint the outside of the house. So we're there on a Saturday. My brother Chuck, he's up on the ladder. I'm holding the ladder, and we hear this voice: "Stop painting that house!" We're like, what? Stop painting that house! I'm like looking around. Stop painting that house! Well, I look over my shoulder. I see this man walking towards us. He's walking like this. The best way I can describe him, he's like Kevin Hart. He's about the same build, except he's bald. Bald Kevin Hart rolls up and he's like, "Stop painting that house." I'm going to paint that house for you. I'll paint the whole house. You only have to pay me $150. We're like, whoa, like was not expecting this on a Saturday morning in West Oak Lake. So my brother gets down off the ladder. We introduce each other. He says, my name's Jimmy. I just moved up here from down south. I'm staying with my sister. I need some work. Let me paint the house. And we're like, well, listen, that's not a fair wage to paint this entire house. Plus, we don't end up on the ladder. It's a little dangerous. But, we do need the inside of the house painted. So if you want to do that, let's work something out. And we did. We paid him a fair wage to paint the inside of the house, and it turned out great. So why did we hire Jimmy? Well, I don't know about the time. For me, it felt like the right thing to do. But why did it feel like the right thing to do? Well, I remember as a kid, I was probably about 13, finished sports camps for the summer, and my mom said, "Why don't you knock on Mr. Petnato's door?" He was our neighbor. He was a landscaper. So I said, "Okay, see if he's got any work." So I went over and knocked on his door. I said, "Hi, Mr. Petnato. I'm Paul, your neighbor from a few doors down." He's like, "Yeah, I know you are." I said, "You got any work?" He's like, "No." Okay, so I went home. About 10 minutes later, there's a knock on my door. Mr. Petnato walked back over. He said, "Hey, listen." He's like, "Pack a lunch tomorrow. Show my house at 7 o'clock. I got some work for you." So for about 2 weeks, yeah, it was great. Got me out of the house, do some landscaping work. So that was a good thing. But let me ask you, if you knocked on a door for work and there wasn't work, and you knocked on the next door and there wasn't, and you knocked on the next door and there wasn't, and the next door, what would you do? Well, what's that? Sure, absolutely. I think I would say the same thing as well. If I'm personally honest about it, though, like I've never been in that situation. I've always been fortunate that those opportunities are available. So as we make these choices in our work, we can choose work that gives others the opportunity for income. And a step further beyond that, we can think about for somebody that's maybe just paused temporarily their job search, that we can do that as we choose our work. All right, so the first house is successful. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna do a little bit more. I decided to roll in night school to get my real estate license, and this was in Center City, Philadelphia. So it's at night. This was just a little bit different. There's people from all different neighborhoods around Philadelphia, different ages, different demographics. Because at this point in my life, my education is pretty much from just one age, one demographic. So it was just a little bit different. And in this classroom, we learned contracts, certainly law, kind of how to do the job. But then the other part is fair housing, and we learned about some of the discrimination that going on just across the country in Philadelphia, and the negative impact that it had, yeah, just on blocks in our neighborhoods. Different being in that more diverse setting. So I got my real estate license, and I got connected with a man that was buying houses at sheriff's sale. Someone couldn't pay their mortgage, their house would get sold at sheriff's sale. And kind of the process, he would win the auction for a particular house. He would call me up and say, "Paul, I have this house. Go take a look at the house. Tell me what you think it's worth." So he would just give me an address. And I remember one of the first ones, it was like South 63rd Street. So I get on my MapQuest back then and put the address in. I'm like, all right, I know where I'm going. So I drive out to Southwest Philadelphia. Has anyone ever been to Southwest Philadelphia? Okay. So I'm driving out there, and as I'm, getting towards the house, I'm seeing abandoned factories, abandoned houses, boarded up houses. Like, whoa! I was like, this is just like Camden. Like, I never even heard of Southwest Philadelphia. Next month, he buys two more houses, and he tells me these addresses: Juniata Park, Grays Ferry. Next month, it's four houses: West Philadelphia, South Philadelphia, Kensington, North Philadelphia. I'm going to all these different neighborhoods, and I'm seeing the same thing over and over again. I'm just like, man, I can't believe yeah, the factories, the houses that's like this. And so that's kind of from a distance, but now I'm starting to get a little more interactions with people as I'm doing this work. So a row house. Has anybody ever lived in a row house, like a straight row across? All right. Oh, all right. Good. Yeah. Okay. So if you go in one row house, a lot of them are about 15 feet wide. If you go in the house, the door shuts. There's enough vibration that the people on each side can kind of know that someone went in. And often what would happen is I go in the house and walk around, take some photos. I come back out, and there'd be someone waiting for me on the porch. And the conversation would often go like this. So they would say to me, you guys are going to do something about that house? The roof's been leaking for 5 years. There's bugs living in there, animals living in there. There's bugs crawling through the walls, and you guys can do something about that. And the man that I worked for, he was a good man. He would take care of that, but it made the awareness of how long that had been going on, that someone was living right next to it. Um, so we bought another house in this was in West Oak Lane, and again, just starting to get to know people kind of on a deeper level as I'm experiencing this. And one tenant had to sign some new paperwork. So we're in his kitchen, and I think it was a new lease, and he has the paperwork in front of him, and he starts to sign the the lease very slowly with his right hand, and he's signing really, really slowly, and he stops for a second, and he looks at me, and he says, the reason that I write so slowly is that I'm actually left-handed, but my dad thought it was weird for me to be left-handed, so he made me write with my right hand. And I was like, wow. So I got to experience that just, in his kitchen, face to face, sharing that story with me. What does that have to do with work? Well, I know for me as a parent, it's a lot easier to be a kind and patient parent when you've had a good day at work. And I think if we think about how that impacts our community, it can make our roles as parents just a little bit easier if we have more opportunity to work in our community. And I think about the person that lives next to the house that was vacant, things falling in, that level of stress that they had in their lives. I think if we can increase the opportunity to work in our community as we make our decisions to work, it can help with those. So we can choose work that gives others the opportunity for peace. All right, so moving along with these houses, I need a painter. So I find a painter. It's a man named John Tucker. You can always kind of get a sense of how friendly someone is by their answer. Well, voicemail now, answering machine back then. His name was John Tucker. So his message was, "Hi, this is John's Wallpaper and Company. I hope that you and your family is doing well." And he really cared about that. He was always interested in me and my family. I was a little bit self-involved. I did ask some things. I got to know him a little bit, but not as much. One thing he shared, he was from down south. He had 9 siblings. Down south, it was just different. I guess just growing up, I just thought everyone was always from Philadelphia. I didn't understand down south what he was getting at. So I had John the painter. Then I needed a plumber. So I went to the supply house, told him about the projects I was doing. Could you remember a plumber, or could you recommend a plumber? They gave me a number named Bob Laster. So I called up Bob, said I need the plumbing done at this house. We meet at the house. He shows up. It's right on time. It's Bob, his younger helper, Mike, size up the job. I get a beautiful handwritten estimate, gives it to me. We come to an agreement. He does the work. Everything turns out great. Timely bill. I was like, wow, that was really good. Call him for the next house. He shows up again, has a great attitude, just happy to be there. It's him and Mike. They show up, do all the plumbing, beautiful work. Everything's perfect. Get a timely bill. I was like, man, these guys are amazing. Next house, they call them. They're out to look at that one, and we're standing in the kitchen. And Mike looks at me and he says, "Hey, Paul, how old do you think Bob is?" And I look at him. He was big, he was strong, and I said, "I don't know, maybe 50, 55." Bob has this big smile on his face. Mike goes, "He's 75." I was like, "What? He's 75 doing this plumbing work in the city?" It was amazing. I had this one house, Southwest Philadelphia, that I was selling. Someone patched the pipes in the basement with concrete, which for our engineers in the room, I don't know if you've ever seen that done before, where you just take old sewer pipes and just slap some concrete on. Anyway, it was the wrong thing to do. So I said, "Bob, can you fix this?" And he's like, yeah, I'll take care of it. So I knew he was out there working, so I went out just to check in on him. And I go down to the basement, and it's Bob and Mike, his helper, just hitting it with a sledgehammer, just breaking up these pipes. I said, "Bob, how long you guys been doing this?" He's like, "3 hours." I was like, "What? 3 hours?" He goes back to hitting it, and he stops for a second. He looks at me. He's like, "This is some tough ass shit," and goes right back to doing it. 75 years old. The amount of joy that he had in his work, it was really cool to be around. So we can choose work that gives others the opportunity for joy. Um, all right. So I've got the houses are going along. I'm selling houses. I live in Mount Airy. Two of my ex roommates here, Chris and Ryan, right? So we're living in Mount Airy, not too far from here, and I'm selling real estate. I meet a family that they looked at some houses in Mount Airy, and they said, "Paul, listen, we're more West Philadelphia folks. Can you set up something for us in the Overbrook section of Philadelphia?" I said, "Yeah, sure, we can do that." So I set up an appointment, and we go out to we park on the block, there's row houses to look at the house. Now, so, there's porches, there's a few steps to the porch, the for sale sign's there. So I park the car, I get out of the car, I got papers in my hand like this. So it's obvious that I'm the realtor, and one of the neighbors sees me, right? And she can tell I'm the realtor. So I'm walking up towards the house, and she's walking up her porch, and we're walking towards us. And we meet. Like, I don't know this lady. We never met her before. We meet right here, like face to face. And she looks at me, and she says to me, just out of nowhere, she says, "When I moved on this block in the 60s, this was the nicest block of Philadelphia. And we were the first black family on this block. And when we moved here, all the white people got scared and they moved away. And now look at it." I was like, whoa, it didn't look very nice. And I remember saying that. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I didn't say anything. At that point in my life, I had my own issues in that I wasn't very good at my job. The houses weren't good investments. I had my own issues. I was self-involved, but I never forgot that. And a few months after I had that little moment of destiny where I got introduced to Mr. Berry, I made a decision in my life that I was gonna serve God in what I did every day. And as I've had to figure that out, I've had to relearn some things. And one of them is a story of a good Samaritan. See, I always heard that. I was like, oh yeah, you help somebody off the side of the road or across the street, and I got that. But what I didn't know was the purpose of that story was to teach us who our neighbors are. And to me, that means we're all connected, that we're all connected. And see, John Tucker, he was from down south. Jimmy was from down south. I meet these other people in our city from down south. I didn't understand what that was all about until I learned recently that as black farmers were no longer needed in the south. They moved north to the factories. And my dad wasn't needed on the farm, that he left the farm to move south. And my mom, her parents were factory workers in Scranton too. And what I'm saying is that we're all farmers and factory workers, that we have that as our common identity if we choose to accept that in our work, that we're all farmers and factory workers, that we have a common identity in that work. If you like country music, there's a song called "My Town" by a band called Montgomery Gentry. One of the lines says, "There ain't much going on here since they closed the mill." It's talking about factories closing. You might like Bruce Springsteen. If you like rock from the city, it doesn't matter where you're from. His song, "My Hometown," Foreman says these jobs are going, boys, and they ain't coming back. It's the same song. It's the same song. We have that connection in our work. It's just up to us to choose to accept it by choosing that tradition that gives everyone in our community the opportunity to work. So I made that decision in my life, and how do we do that? Because that's always the challenge too. Even when you have that deep motivation, it's still how do you get to a deeper level? So I'll share 4 things on that. So we can choose work that gives others the opportunity for income. According to the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, right? Energy efficiency creates jobs in our community. Most of us in the room know that or have been experienced projects that do it. If you invest $1 million, just buy your energy like you normally do, it creates 10 jobs in our economy. Investing in energy efficiency, that same $1 million would create 20. So it's additional jobs. If you invest $1 million in manufacturing, it creates 14. So it can do that in our community, and we can grow that. And I know a lot of us have been doing that already. But I think the next step, and I wanted to get together to kind of share this story if it helps you, but also hoping a little inspiration for myself as well, because I feel like I'm almost there to like really do that, because I think there's steps that we can do more, right? The job that hires five people, how do we get it to 7 people? How do we get beyond that? I think is a challenge. I was at the local hardware store, and we all experience it. It's hard to find people now, right? It's hard to find people for work that we need. But this little feedback, someone said, "Oh, at our hardware store, oh, I can't. You wouldn't believe the people that are applied for this. They don't have the skills." Okay, Or another person in real estate said, well, I can't hire that person to be a roofer because they don't know how to read a tape measure. And I think that we can look at the skills as a shortcoming of a community, not a flaw in an individual, that we have that choice to do it. I shared when I was 22 as a carpenter, I had very little skills and almost none to start. I knew a little bit about tools, but not much. But I ended up getting assigned to this job site, and the foreman, this man named Addison, is a really great guy. Like he didn't judge me for not knowing how to do things to him that were pretty simple. He just said, all right, you're here, you showed up, well, I'll teach you. And I actually got good at that pretty quickly. And I don't think he did it because he saw anything in me. I think he just knew it was the thing to do. So we can do that as we choose our work. We can choose that work that gives others the opportunity for peace. Last fall at our company, I led a little bit of a competitive analysis for the products that we sell. Lighting
competitors. I didn't think about it at the time, but really the best ones are the low stress products, and we just think about how we contribute to other people's lives in that, and really putting that at the top of the list. Like we think about what things can do, what are the specs, what it can do, but really it's I think on a deeper level, it's the stress that you can put someone there. So we can choose work that gives others the opportunity for peace. We can choose work that gives others the opportunity for joy. I think about Bob Laster, the plumber, and being so old and just love what he did every day. And I think about, I don't know how he got his start necessarily, but he got his start somehow. And what if when he was younger, someone just said, you know what, Bob, like you just work the loading dock, you just work the security desk, you just clean up. You never would have had that joy in what he did. It was a pretty cool thing that what he did. Bob was a 75-year-old black man. His apprentice Mike was probably 25. He was white, but the two of them, just to see them working together, the joy they had, learning from each other, working together, it was a cool thing. So we can choose that. And then lastly, we can choose work that gives us the opportunity for a common identity. There's a difference between being a coworker, at least I've experienced this, and really working together side by side on a project. I experienced this recently. Brian Kelly, one of my coworkers at Synergy, you guys know. So we've been coworkers a long time, but never really kind of put in the same spot in the same room to work together. So we end up in this big house. So we have our fancy lighting system. We've got dimmers, switches, and we have an app to program it. We have to figure out where they all go. What I'm saying is when it's just the two of you next to each other to figure it out, what I've observed is that our flaws become evident very, very quickly. At least for me, they do. I'm not very organized. That's a challenge in my life. But the thing is, when you're really working with someone, those flaws become evident. Yes, we're humbled by them, but we're connected, and we can see them quickly, and we can help each other out with them. So we can choose work that gives us a common identity and look at that. So if you're still, that's the decision I made, tradition versus productivity. If you're still unsure which side you want to go, I'll just share one more thing. The more I embrace, me personally, the tradition part, the luckier I get. The projects that I'm involved in, and more importantly, the people, a lot of them are in this room. I feel like that's just luckier that I'm involved in those, but the help that in some ways comes out of nowhere. To do that, we just get a little bit luckier as we do it. So I've made that decision, and I appreciate you so much for spending a little time together. If you have any questions or comments that you want to share in front of the group, I'm open. If you don't, that means I got off easy. That's good too. So, thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment on the idea of physical labor being part of a well-rounded worker and using the education to balance out that idea of physicality in a world where everything is being automated. We don't have to move. We don't use our
appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I haven't been, as you can tell, I've done a lot of things in my life and experienced things, but I think what you're saying, Stephen, that I see a different side. I see the office side, like Tom and Brian that are here. We work on the design side for construction projects, but then I'm also with the folks that are out, physically doing it, and they're just both really important. I think it's what you're getting to, and yeah, I don't have all the answers, but I think at some point we're better off doing the physical work than just entering another layer of paperwork, I guess, so to speak, to it. So I appreciate you sharing that. Well, thanks so much, guys. I'll be around if you have anything that you want to talk through, but that's it. So free to go. Thanks.